Representatives, Dr. Joe Wood, Executive Director of Evaluation and Employment, adjourned to closed session at 5:32.
For the next room. We are assigned.
That's why.
The officials were getting together to make sure that Allen was not across the line of scrimmage.
snap song. All right. Yeah. So where are we? Here we go, okay. All right, are we good to join again? Live, okay. All right, I will reconvene open session at 6:21. No action taken during closed session. Do we have anybody? We have our student representatives here. But no new attendees from roll call. Okay,
Gina's,
Gina's en route.
did you hear about from Gina?
Gina is not,
Okay.
has not communicated that
Okay.
she's joining us, so we'll plan that she is not. I would like to state for the record that our student representatives have arrived. We have Milo from Star Academy. We have Kia from Leading Edge, Gianna from PFAA, and Diego from ECA.
All right, hearing of the public for items not on the agenda.
Nothing received with me.
Great, okay, hearing of the public for items on the agenda.
Also, nothing received with me.
Okay,
And I'm gonna check members of the public online.
okay. Student information update. Diego, will you start us off for ECA?
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all again. But for the first month of back to school, we had our Link Crew and Link Day on August 7th. So that's basically where the upperclassmen mentor the freshmen throughout the first semester to help them get into school. Since ECA is so different, they need a little extra help. And we did icebreakers activities to get them warmed up to us. So during orientation week, students that are not freshmen got the rundown of ECA, and families in them got familiar with Schoology and how the assignments are going to work for ECA. And then we had our back to school bash on the 30th. There were snacks, games, and activities for the students. And it was right before back to school night, which was the same day. And it showed previous students' hard work to showcase how our school does and to explain the structure of ECA to parents. And then finally, we have a farewell congratulations to Miss Eigner, who was working on her master's degree in school counseling and was hired as the 11th and 12th grade counselor at PFA. We'll miss her, but we're very happy for her.
All right, next up. Is it Kia? Kia, yay, I got it right.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kia Safi, and I am the new Leading Edge School Board Rep for the 2023 to 2024 Leading Edge year. So let's get started. First off, we have our ASB. Our Associated Student Body has started strong with our speeches, our elections, and our it has been announced on the PA for the elected students that are on ASB. We're starting strong with our getting to start our rallies and our first Spirit Week. Then we have our Back to School Night, which happened on August 24th. There were multiple booths set up with Knights Landing. We have volunteer fingerprinting, and then we also had booths from LEAP. Students and teachers were all prepared and ready to rock. LE Media Team. Dr. Lactus has set up a team that is working on morning announcements, news, social media, and short films, documentary style. We're already getting a head start with our first video being done by next week. Then we have our LEAP active Leading Edge parent officers for the 2023 to 2024 school year. Annie Kate for president, Kate Nolly vice president, Karen Esperanza for budget, and Jessica Emilio and Millie Mendoza volunteer coordinators. LEAP has already set up 50 volunteers to serve in different ways this year, which is an amazing way to start our community off. Lastly, we have our sixth grade sports, volleyball and football, which have already had their first games and another game next week, bringing home our first win. That's it. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Gianna.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gianna. I'm the PFA board representative. So we started off the year. ASB had their membership sale. So these are sale membership. ASB membership helps students get free access to dances and to ASB events throughout the year. It helps us fundraise as well. And through that, on Back to School Night, which was August 31st, we were able to sell over 600 tickets in addition to our original sale. So we were able to make fundraise a lot for the year. One Voice, the One Voice project restarted this year for 2023 to 2024, and that started the second day of school, which was August 10th, and has been going on since then. And we also had our 6th grade orientation and our Link Crew freshman orientation on August 7th and August 8th. Furthermore, we had Picture Day on August 31st and Senior Sunrise on August 9th. Let's see. And then as for our departments, the dance department has set up a Chipotle fundraiser, and the visual arts department had Chalk It Up. This is a very important event sponsored by the Assembly member McCartney, and we get to basically be part of Sacramento's Chalk It Up. And this year we had the topic of affordable housing, and so we were able to create a piece based on that. And then other than that, senior projects and American Artists is in the works for our upperclassmen, and senior portraits have also been taken. And then the PSAT registration and National Honor Society is in the works. The PSAT will be next week, and I believe National Honor Society results are coming soon in the next week or so. And then for the drama department, they're starting to rehearse the Laramie project, and this Thursday they're actually bringing the Matthew Shepard Foundation to our school. And so the actual family of Matthew Shepard is going to come and speak after school and during wind times. And I believe that's all. We also have a Link Crew social this Friday on this Friday. And we had a Link Crew social last Friday. My bad. Anyways, I think that's all. Disney trip planning is in the works for, I believe, the vocal department this year, and then possibly the visual arts department. But that's all I have for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Milo.
Hello, I am Milo Shaw, and I'm a 5th grader here at Star Academy, and I'm going to tell you all about our school year so far. First, we had our back-to-school picnic. There were food trucks and games for families. Families could get dinner, parents could hang out, and children and students could play. Next, we had our back-to-school night. Parents met teachers and visited classrooms to see what their students are going to learn this year. And another exciting event we had were the student government elections. Students voted for their class representatives to represent our school in 5th grade. Students got to vote 2 representatives, and the top 2 people from each class are the student governments. Then we had our first attendance. We met in the gym, and it is a reward for being for good attendance and being on time to school. We played different songs such as the conga line. Thank you, parents, for getting us to school on time. In the classroom, students are completing our ready diagnostics. We have our first diagnostic at the beginning of the school year, our second diagnostic at the middle of the school year, and our last diagnostic at the end of the school year. It's fun to see how our scores grow up throughout the year. Also, specials classes started the second week of school, such as art, PE, Spanish, and library. Every special is a fun opportunity for students to learn. In art, we get to express our creativity. In PE, we get to exercise our bodies. In Spanish, Senor Daquan is teaching us how to speak Spanish, and in library, Mr. Strazo is talking about books and how some of them have won awards. At the last 15 minutes, he lets us do book checkout. 2 other specialist classes we have are Mindfulness and Kind Kids. Mindfulness is with Miss Shane, our art teacher. We get to calm our bodies down and express things like tiny little joys and breathing exercises when we're feeling down or mad. In Kind Kids, we get to talk about things we can do to help our friends when they're feeling sad or mad. We get to talk about things we can do to help improve our world. The last update I have is all classes are creating norms and working on building belonging. Each class created norms as a way to show good behavior in the classroom and building a good community for our school. Thank you for listening. I'm so glad I could tell you about our school year.
Thank you, Milo. And thanks to all of you. Look forward to working with you for the next year or 3, whatever you decide. What's next? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot one student back here. Oh, where's Alicia?
She's not here tonight. She's
Oh.
actually sick. So I will go over the PACT Academy update.
Okay,
So Alicia writes, we're still in the process of searching for a new student representative to the board from PACT Academy. Our school-wide theme for the year is There's No Place Like Home. There's a lot of Wizard of Oz paraphernalia at Star, or at PACT in there. So we'll spend the year journeying down the yellow brick road as we focus on the character traits of wisdom, kindness, courage, and community, focusing on a different character from the Wizard of Oz each quarter. Our year has gotten off to a great start with new families joining our learning community and onboarding the PACT Academy way. Parents attended orientation sessions in August, and we held our big back to school picnic at North Natomas Park on August 25th with many staff, students, and families in attendance. Our field trip season is already in full swing with trips to the Woodland Fire Department, California Agricultural Museum, and the Maidu Interpretive Center already in the books. Enrichment workshops began the week of August 28th and found our PACT scholars enjoying a variety of enrichment opportunities in dance, music, art, science, drama, and more. We also launched our first ever Academics Foundations workshop, which provide homeschooling scholars with 2-hour instructional blocks in math and language arts each week. Finally, we kicked off our parent education program with our first parent coffee talk on September 5th. The topic of conversation at this inaugural session was choosing and pacing curriculum. Sessions will occur monthly and cover a variety of topics to support homeschooling parents.
all right, thank you. Any questions on the student information updates? Okay, comments, questions, tonight's agenda? Anyone? All right, may I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda? So moved. Thank you, Ashante. I'll second. Thank you, Dr. Mayoraldo. Board member vote, Doug? Nita?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Dr. Mayoraldo?
Yes.
Jennifer, I'm a yes. Ashante?
Yes.
Okay, moving on. Consent items, comments, questions, thoughts?
That includes separations. Is that, no?
Yeah, separations are in here too.
Because I saw, I just saw Donato.
Who?
The gentleman, Mr. Donato, the
Uh-huh.
custodian, is leaving?
There's two Mr. Donato.
Oh, there's two, is that Miss Donato?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a
So
different
just one.
Donato.
Different one.
Okay, all right, that's what I was wondering, thank you.
All right, if that's it, may I have a motion to approve tonight's consent items?
Well, I don't wanna do it every
My goodness.
I so
Motion.
moved. Tell me more.
Sean motion.
Good, Sean, all right, I'll
Thank you,
second.
Sean. Yay.
Well, let's see. A little oil or something.
All right. Maria?
Yes.
Shante?
Yes.
Jennifer, I'm a yes. Doug?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Nita?
Yes.
All right.
And I'm sorry, I caught that Sean made the motion, I didn't catch the second.
Nita.
Nita, thank you.
All right. Let's see. Oh, now we're on to this section K, Lisa Ford for our LGBTQ plus legal workshop from Young Indian Board.
Hi, good evening. How's everyone?
Good.
I really appreciate you having me tonight. I want to ask you all to do me a favor. I know you only wanted me here for about 30 minutes and I'm like the chattiest person in any room. And so I'd ask, these materials are thick. I don't want you to be too nervous about them. I decided to lean on more written information. I'm going to try to keep it quick, but I don't have my timer. So please give me the wrap up, give me the cane. I will not take it personally. This is a topic that we could talk about for a days-long workshop. We could do multiple days, really just on the glossary, we could talk for an hour. And so I provided a glossary of terms. I'm not going to go through it. I think a lot of you are familiar with these terms, but I gave it to you as a little bit of a desktop reference if you need it for future use. Again, my name is Lisa Ford, one of the partners at Young Indian Board. You swap the screen, thank you. Of course, anytime we're giving legal advice in this type of venue, we're not taking individual facts into consideration, which might change the outcome of our advice, giving a specific student question, but we're going to be talking about generalized legal advice today. Always got to start with disclaimers. We're attorneys, you know how it is. I would say that that the favorite saying of every attorney is, "It depends." So I think you have all met our firm before. We've worked with charter schools throughout the state since the inception of the Charter Schools Act. We currently represent about 700 charter schools throughout the state. And I'm lucky enough to both live in your backyard and also have 2+ kids that have come through your school. I want to say, one of my bonus kiddos that lived with us for years was a graduate from PFAA. And let's keep moving along. And that is a way old picture. I took pictures, I'm telling you, months ago, and I don't know why, but every time they put this up, I'm like, it's just demonstrating the aging process. Okay. Because it's such a meaty topic, I thought instead of an agenda, I just start with the takeaways. What do I want you to take away from this presentation? And the first and foremost is that state and federal laws protect LGBTQIA+ students from discrimination. We may not discriminate on them based upon both our state laws and our federal laws. And when we operate in any way that potentially goes against our state and federal laws, we risk not just harming those students, but also we risk violations of the law, which could lead to discrimination complaints, both for the school and also for individual employees as well. It could also lead to audit by both the California Department of Education and the Office of Civil Rights. And that's why we're here today going through this discussion, both from a legal perspective, protecting the school and its employees, but more importantly, protecting those students, and we'll talk more about that in the presentation. Secondly, is that our state law specifically recognizes the right of student engagement in school facilities and activities per their identified gender. And so that would include restroom use, that would include locker room use, that would include sports activities that are gender specific as well. That when a student identifies it as gender other than that gender in which they were born, they are specifically allowed under state law to utilize the restroom facilities, the school activities of their identified gender. And the last takeaway is that the risk of self-harm to LGBTQIA+ students in California and nationwide is vastly higher than other students, particularly for transgender youth. And that's why really we're here tonight, is to protect students from harm. Let's keep going. That was my cute picture for the glossary. These are some of the laws that we're going to be talking about tonight. Title IX, which is a federal law, the California Civil Rights Act, the FAIR Act, which discusses the inclusive access to curriculum throughout the state of California, the School Success and Opportunity Act, which is the law that establishes the access to facilities of the identified gender, California Healthy Youth Act, which is just California's fancy way of saying sex education, and more. We're going to talk about all of these. And a lot of these laws are incredibly old. And so we're hearing about this a lot in the news lately, but these aren't new laws. It's not as if they just popped up. These are laws that are 10+ years old at this point. So why are we talking about it today? Well, you probably have seen in the news that there's been a lot of discussion about LGBTQIA rights, both from the political perspective surrounding the upcoming election, but also, as you might have seen lately, that there has been a lot of pressure on school districts specifically and charter schools to ban certain books in schools. And also lastly, and I think maybe most concerning, is the trend among school districts to adopt policies which would require school employees to notify parents when a student is identifying as a transgender student, and notify them of the student's use of alternative pronouns or alternative names. You may have been hearing in the news that just last week, the Rockland Unified School District was the most recent school board to adopt such a policy. The first of those boards to adopt the policy is Chino Unified School District. And I think last week on the 6th, After a lawsuit by the California Attorney General, the courts put a temporary restraining order on Chino's use and implementation of that policy. And we'll talk a little bit in this discussion as to what does that restraining order mean as to potentially the Attorney General's possibility of success when it comes to a full hearing. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Just a little bit of statistics that Joe was nice enough to provide us. Natomas Charter School has enrolled 1,874 students. It's incredible. Of those, we have an unknown amount of LGBTQIA plus students. However, we know that 30 families registered their child identifying them as transgender or non-binary this year. These are some staggering statistics from the Trevor Project that you can certainly go through on your own, but I think it's important to just recognize that they surveyed over 28,000 LGBTQIA plus students ages 13 to 24. 41% of participants had noted that they considered suicide in the past year, and 14% of those participants actually attempted suicide. And then California recently, in some legislation, has identified that 54% of transgender and non-binary youth in California in the past year have considered suicide, and 19% have attempted suicide. In general, LGBTQIA plus students have been identified in that legislation as being 5 times more likely to have attempted suicide than their peers. Let's move on to non-discrimination laws. So really quick flyby on non-discrimination laws, because I think we're somewhat familiar with the fact that we can't discriminate in the state of California and federal under both the state and federal constitutions. Under Title IX, it is a prohibition against discrimination on the basis of gender. The Office of Civil Rights in 2021 expanded that to identify that any institution that is receiving federal funds may not discriminate on the basis of sex, including sexual orientation and gender identity. And then the California Department of Education similarly expanded their interpretation as well to expand both to gender identity and gender expression in 2021. And then if you go to the next slide, we have an overarching anti-discrimination provision in California's Education Code Section 220. And under the Charter Schools Act, we as charter schools have to affirm in our charter documents that we may not discriminate on the basis of any protected characteristics. You'll see that those protected characteristics have expanded over the years. In 2007, they added gender and sexual orientation, and in 2011, they added gender identity and gender expression. So what does discrimination look like to LGBTQIA students in the school setting? What types of cases does our office see when it comes to allegations of discrimination? Deliberately referring to a student by their dead name or dead pronouns is one common claim of discrimination. Any type of bullying based upon their LGBTQIA plus students' appearance, their sex, their voice, or for failing to conform to stereotypes, any type of homophobic or transphobic slurs, using violence, failure to allow students to use the restroom, locker room, or other facilities that correspond to their gender identity, or forcing them to some sort of neutral facility. And so a lot of schools have thought, well, I have a solution to this, and I'm going to just force them to use a neutral facility, and then we're not hurting anybody. That's what's commonly heard in our office. But by not allowing them to use the facilities of their gender identity, we are potentially causing them harm and violating state law and risking a claim of discrimination. Moving on to the next slide. Additionally, failure to allow them to participate in sex segregated activities based upon their gender identity or expression, or applying policies differently to LGBTQIA students, such as, for example, dress codes as a good example of that, not providing them the same opportunities as other students, or by violating their privacy by disclosing information related to their LGBTQIA status to others, or even their parents. And we're going to talk about that during this further, because I think that's one of the hottest topics right now that we're seeing in the news. Let's do a quickie flyby on curriculum laws, because I think there's a lot of confusion. We get a lot of parents that will send to our clients messages that say, my child may not access that curriculum. They are not allowed to see that book. They are not allowed to have access to that book. There are only very limited opt-outs in California law for a parent to opt out. One, state standardized testing, for example. Two is the California Healthy Youth Act, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. The FAIR Act, which is Fair, Accurate, Inclusive, and Respectful Act, was adopted in 2011 to ensure that the instruction in social science includes a broad range of contributions of both men, women, Native Americans, African Americans, Mexican Americans, Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, European Americans, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender Americans, persons with disabilities, and members of other ethnic and cultural groups. The idea is that they want a wide range of individuals represented when we're teaching the social sciences. There's no opt-out to the FAIR Act. There is, in fact, upcoming legislation prohibiting the banning of these instructional materials from California schools. That's AB 1078. And if adopted, and I think in the latest I saw it was being enrolled for adoption, that it is urgency legislation, which would mean that it would take place immediately as opposed to waiting to the start of the year. Here's some additional provisions of the FAIR Act. You'll just see that it prevents us from providing any curriculum in a discriminatory basis with any discriminatory bias, that when we're adopting instructional materials, we need to make sure that we're being inclusive in representing all of those important cultural aspects of that are listed in the slide before. I don't want to take too much depth in here. The California Healthy Youth Act is one of the other provisions in law where a parent may actually opt out. They have to affirmatively opt out. There's no required opt-in. They have to affirmatively opt out. This is what we would have referred to before in the olden days when I was in school. I'm being silly, as sex ed, now sexual health instruction. You can see that the California Healthy Youth Act requires both in middle school and in high school sexual health instruction. It also requires that in that instruction that they affirmatively recognize that people have different sexual orientations, and when discussing and providing examples of relationships in couples, that the instruction has to be inclusive of same-sex relationships as well. It also requires instruction and instructional materials to teach students about gender, gender expression, gender identity, and explore the harm of negative gender stereotypes. California Healthy Youth Act does allow for an opt-out. However, if you go to the next slide, the California Healthy Youth Act specifically states that it does not apply to any instructions, materials, presentations, or programming that discuss gender, gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, discrimination, or harassment that does not discuss human reproductive organs and their functions. And so it's really clear that that opt-out is very, very limited to the California Healthy Youth Act and sexual health instruction, and not a broader discussion of curriculum on gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, etc. Okay. On to gender separated space and activities. This has been one of the most commonly fraught areas of concern. You know, when this law was first adopted, Education Code Section 221.5, that a pupil is permitted to participate in sex segregated school programs and activities consistent with their gender identity, irrespective of the gender listed on the pupil's records. There was a lot of confusion, a lot of concern throughout the state, and even the most well-intentioned schools, as I mentioned before, struggled a bit to implement. So for example, it wasn't uncommon to see schools suggest that a transgender student use a neutral restroom or a neutral locker room facility, and actually to require it rather than to allow them to use the restroom or locker room facility of their gender identity. And the law specifically requires that they are allowed to utilize the locker room or restroom of their gender identity. Now, that said, if a student wishes to utilize a neutral facility, and I mean any student, because they have concerns about using the restroom or changing in front of other students, it is best practice to have facilities for students to respect their privacy needs, and that goes to all students broadly. Let's move to the next slide. And so we cannot require a student to use a neutral facility. There may be other students or parents of other students that express concern regarding transgender students within the restroom facilities or within the locker room. However, those concerns do not override state law's requirement to allow those students to use the restroom facility or the locker room facility of their gender identity. Instead, we can work with those parents or those students to see whether they would be more comfortable using a neutral facility for the restroom or locker room facilities. A lot of schools are moving towards locker room facilities that have multiple changing stations with curtains, because in general, schools are finding that students in general do not enjoy changing in front of one another. As a prior middle school child, I can assert that yes, that is absolutely the case. Okay, let's move on. Here's just some best practices around locker room and restroom facilities, ensuring that we are privacy optimizing facilities for all students, ensuring that this right expands not just to facilities, but also to activities. So to the extent that we have gender segregated sports teams or activities, or if we're going on a field trip and we are placing students in hotel rooms, that we are again utilizing the facility, the activity of the identified gender. One good practice that I've seen is putting out an annual notice of these legal requirements so that parents understand this is not a choice of the school. This is not a choice that you've made. It's not a political statement. It is compliance with the law. You all may have differing opinions as to whether or not that law is a good law or a bad law. But what the state legislature has said is that this law exists. It exists to protect the mental health of these students, and therefore we must implement. Okay.
Quick question.
Yes, please.
The slide you were just reading.
Yes,
was
please.
Specific to what we're doing here at Natomas Charter School. We are doing these things.
Yes, we are actually doing all of those things. So there was nothing that Lisa and I kind of talked out a little bit too, some different scenarios and stuff. And so these are all the things that we're doing.
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit about privacy laws in general. In California, a student's personal information is protected, and that includes informational privacy. We know also under federal law, we refer to our rights to privacy under FERPA, the Family Educational Rights to Privacy Act, but also just California's constitutional rights includes not just a right to protection of their student records, but also it includes an expectation of privacy as to sexual orientation as well. Our California Supreme Court expanded the constitutional, well, I don't think they expanded it, but when they interpreted the constitutional provision, made it clear that that constitutional provision in Article 1, Section 1 also includes a right to privacy as to sexual orientation as well. Let me go to the next slide. Thank you. So under our, in the law, we have an obligation to maintain certain student records. Our records are referred to in the law, not colloquially. We always refer to a CUNE record. It's not a law. It's not a word that we have in the law at all. Our records actually break down into what's called mandatory permanent records, mandatory interim records, and permitted records that we may maintain as a school. Under the law, our mandatory permanent record includes a student's name, their date of birth, their gender, their name and address, their entry and leaving dates, their immunizations, and their transcript, their grades and the courses taken. In that mandatory permanent record, we have to list the student's gender by birth, unless and until the student's name and gender are changed by parent approval or documentation. So if a student brings in documentation of a name change, we can change that mandatory permanent record with that documentation. If a parent authorizes a gender change to the student record, the mandatory permanent record, we can change it there as well. However, all of the other records, the mandatory interim records, the records I have not listed when I said those that limited window, those are official records. All the other records are referred to as unofficial records. Report cards, IEPs, any letters that go to the student, communications, all of those, we can use the student's chosen name, chosen pronouns, and chosen gender. And so even though that mandatory permanent record must maintain the gender by birth, the identified gender of the student can be utilized on all unofficial records, which would include school rosters, attendance sheets, even a broad range of communications home. That would mean even if the parent has not given us permission, so if the student has informed us of their preferred pronouns, if a student has referred to us as to use a chosen name or a lived name as opposed to a dead name, we should respect their request for that, and we should update unofficial school records to include that chosen gender and name. Now, what risk does that provide to the student, and why should we have a better and longer conversation with the student? It's because parents have an absolute right to access their student records. So as soon as a student says, I want you to update all my records, but I don't want you to tell my parents that I'm identifying by this gender, or I'm identifying by this pronoun, or I'm utilizing a lived name rather than a dead name, those records get updated. And if a parent makes a request for those records, they have an absolute right to those records within 5 business days. And so a student really should be informed that I hear you and you're asking me to maintain this privacy. To the extent that we update these written records, those records will become accessible to your parents upon request. And so what we have is a bit of a crossroads. We have privacy rights under the California Constitution. We have lots of guidance both from the Office of Civil Rights Federal and the California Department of Education asking us to respect the privacy of students at all costs and to ensure that we are not violating that privacy by telling a parent of the student's chosen gender or identified gender against their wishes. But we should be communicating with students to let them know that we do have both state and federal law, which requires absolute access to student records. And so as we go through this, we'll be talking a little bit about the student records some more, and what discussions we should be having with the students, and letting them know that they run the show in a way, they guide us in how much information is shared. However, we should also be providing guidance to them as to the potential risk of exposure through the student records, and also perhaps considering assisting them in communicating carefully with their parents as to their identified gender.
Can I pause you for a brief second?
Please
I
do.
promise I won't do it.
No,
So,
no, not at all, don't worry.
Out of all the things Lisa's gonna present on tonight, this has actually been the area that's been kind of the stickiest wicket for us over the last 10 or 12 years that I've been here. So all the things like Lisa said, permanent records, or sorry, if you will, official records, unofficial records, and one little other fun caveat that we have to navigate is that often some of those unofficial records that students want updated is like the name on their email account, which is also the name on their Schoology record. And because we have Schoology set up so that parents can follow the kids, that information is always immediately available to the parent. They don't have to wait 5 business days. It's basically within the hour when the sync occurs.
That's right.
So what we do is what Lisa just described, where basically if a student comes to us and says, I'd like to change my name in all these different ways, we kind of say, okay, would you pause for just a second? What do your parents currently know? And how do we help you have that conversation with your parents? Because the reality is, this is going to immediately be known. Like if we are making this choice here of changing all of these unofficial records, we're not intentionally trying to, if you will, disrespect the student's privacy rights, but being really honest with the student that it is no longer completely private information at that point. Teachers can see it, other students can see it, and certainly your families can see it in Schoology as well. And so we also use that as an opportunity to educate the students, even if like the parents have agreed and they know and everything about, here's where you're still gonna see your legal name, and here's where you're gonna see that chosen name. Because unless they've gone through like a legal name change process, they're still gonna see their legal name on things like their standardized test. When they log into their standardized test, it shows their legal name, it doesn't show
Their
their
CalPADS data.
their CalPADS data, all of that. So we basically will talk to the student a little bit about that and try to educate them about it so that at least they're making an informed decision and everyone's on the same page. Because as Lisa was talking about, our goal is always to work very closely with the student and very closely with the family and have, complete transparency, recognizing we have some legal requirements within the law that we have to follow. That idea of, the student is somewhat in the driver's seat about this because there is privacy concerns that they have some legal control over. But our goal is to get everyone kind of on that same page because we have that 3-way compact of the family, the student, and the school really trying to work together. And secrets generally aren't a good thing. Like we need to try to move towards helping people have conversations.
9 times out of 10, the parents are aware, and the parents are either supportive or unsupportive, and we know it, right? But there is that small percentage where we are aware that the student has not communicated with the parent, and the student has said, I don't want you to communicate with the parents, and that's where we get into the sticky wicket. And I think sometimes schools are surprised when the first question I ask is, what does the student want to do? I always lead with, what can we help the student do in this case? Sometimes students have expressed that they have fear of harm at home, and that might implicate sometimes mandated reporter requirements that we have as educators. And sometimes it's just a discomfort. They need counseling support to help have that an uncomfortable discussion. Maybe they just fear disapproval, but sometimes it's more than that. It's more than fear and disapproval. It's actual fear of harm. So let's go into the next topic, which is, of course, this topic of how are parent rights implicated under these laws. And so there are older, you can see here, 1923 cases establishing some parental rights, meaning that parents have the right to direct the upbringing and education of their children under their control. That comes from a 1923 decision. Since these decisions have come out, the Supreme Court, the US Supreme Court has not issued an opinion in over 50 years. I anticipate that we are going to see opinions coming subsequently, either from our California Supreme Court, the US Supreme Court, or both. Some of these cases are going to make their way up, and we have one of the cases that is potentially heading in that direction. If we go to the next slide, it's a case called Regino v. Stanley, and it is discussing a claim of parents against a school for not informing them of their child's identity. In that case, with just a lower federal court found that that schools are not required to notify parents of their child's gender identity or to obtain their parents' right before using their child's alternative names and pronouns. That's how the court referred to it. That is a 2023 case, so it's very recent. It very well may be brought up on appeal and make its way up to the Ninth Circuit, which is our California District for Federal Courts of Appeals, and it may end up at the US Supreme Court. Moving on to the next one. The Chino Valley Unified School District, I referenced it early, they adopted a policy which required notice to parents upon a student's request to be identified as a gender or name other than that assigned at birth. Or if the student requested a sex segregated space or activities that didn't align with their gender at birth. And after that adoption of their policy, the Attorney General filed a lawsuit arguing that the policy infringed on state law protections, safeguarding students' civil and constitutional rights, and created serious safety concern for those students. And on September 6th, a temporary restraining order was granted. And what that means is that until there is a hearing on this matter, the Chino Unified School District is prevented from implementing that policy. What it means from a legal perspective, though, is really important. In order to grant a temporary restraining order, a court has to find two things. Number one is that the Attorney General is likely to win on the merits. So when they grant this restraining order, they're saying, we have a hearing to still hear your case, Chino Valley Unified School District. However, we think that the Attorney General is likely to win, and so we're going to grant this restraining order. Very important. Number two is that they found irreparable harm. What that means is that they fear that these students will be irreparably harmed if the Chino Valley Unified School District were allowed to implement that policy while the hearing was pending. So two really important things that the courts found to protect the students' safety at issue, and they had a lot of declarations from students, arguing as to the harm that would be applied if if their gender identity was revealed against their wishes. Even after the temporary restraining order was issued, you can see the school district boards that adopted similar policies. Rockland Unified School District in our backyard, Murrieta, Temecula, and Orange Unified School District adopting identical policies. Next slide. So these next slides about what do we know, these are coming from the California Department of Education's FAQ. And you'll see that the California Department of Education's frequently asked questions very much lean very heavily in favor of protecting the privacy of the student's gender identity, even against the parents' rights to know. And so you'll see, does a parent have a constitutional right to protect a charter school or to prohibit a charter school employee from calling their child by a new name or pronoun? The California Department of Education has said no. There is no constitutional right of a parent to prohibit an employee from from aligning with the wishes of the student as to their pronoun or live name or preferred name. Can parents prohibit their child from using the facility of their gender identity or from participating in sex segregated activities that align with their gender identity? No, they cannot do so. They cannot prohibit. It's against state law, as we've just discussed. Can a charter school employee tell a parent about their child's chosen name and pronouns without the student's consent? Further, can the LEA employee tell anyone else about the requested name and pronoun? The California Department of Education says no. However, they recognize the dichotomy of the student record issue, which is that if once it lands in the student's unofficial records, that the parent may have access to it through a records request. Moving on to the next slide. What would be some of the consequences if an employee were to intentionally tell a parent about their student's name and pronoun change against the student's will? So I should have actually put that in the slide as opposed to with the student's permission. We could face claims of discrimination, which could also lead to monetary damages. We could have complaints under our UCP or Uniform Complaint Procedures. Those are complaints related to discrimination, which then can be appealed all the way up to the California Department of Education and impact state funding. We can have Office of Civil Rights complaints, which can impact federal funding, and also can require training activities, audits of our school policies. And as I always say, when you have an Office of Civil Rights complaint, it's like going to the eye doctor and then handing you a robe and telling you to change. And you're like, wait a second, I thought I was at the eye doctor. It's always a deeper dive than you expected. And so you always want to avoid an Office of Civil Rights complaint. And then similarly, if we were to adopt a policy similar to, let's say, Chino Valley Unified School District, I would expect that we might see the California Department of Education and/or the Office of Civil Rights, which is an arm of the U.S. Department of Education, to come in and do a very thorough audit. Next slide. And so next question is, can a student change their name or pronouns in their student records without parental consent? As we just discussed, yes, as to their unofficial student records, which would mean their mandatory interim student records or their permitted records, their report cards, their IEPs, their attendance records, their email addresses, for example. However, as to their mandatory permanent record, that student name that shows up in CalPADS, for example, no name change unless there's documentation provided, and no gender change unless the parent authorizes that gender change, of course, until the student's 18.
What's our process for receiving that type of request from a student? Is it a form?
Yeah, we actually have a form that is filled out, so the student completes the form, provides some basic information about what needs to be changed. And then we have actually a student acknowledgement and a parent acknowledgement on the form.
Okay.
And we have the parent acknowledgement because what we do is, this is where we have that conversation. So the student's very aware of what's gonna happen next, and that, your new name is gonna show up in Schoology, or your new name is gonna show up in Google. Whereas if the student's like, I don't feel comfortable with that, then we strongly advise them not to move forward with this process.
Okay. And is there one administrator who's kind of charged with overseeing? I just wanna make sure that the conversation is similar with each.
So we actually have two ways that we have it. So Molly, who's our data manager, she's actually the keeper of the form because she's gonna be the one who's gonna be changing the data. And so she will actually work with each of the principals so that the principal is ready to have that conversation. Typically, it's a high school conversation. So typically that it's Gareth and Elsa for PFAA, or it would be Kim for ECA.
And oftentimes, the person leading the charge in the actual conversation is the person who's the most trusted to the student. Sometimes the student is comfortable telling one teacher, but not all teachers. And so sometimes it's a conversation first with the most trusted.
Can I add one other thing too? Because I think there's what the law says, and then there's like living it, right?
Yes.
So living it, what kind of happens, let's kind of think of like the journey of a student from, I have a new chosen name to legal name change all the way over here, right? That's typically a multi-year journey. And typically what we find is that the student will verbally maybe tell teachers or peers, and there's some acknowledgement of it in the classroom for an extended period of time before they're submitting a form for a name change request. So I don't know if we've ever had a situation where when the form was submitted, everyone didn't already know, and that's why I'm saying then it's more of a conversation of like, well, have you talked to your parents? You know, because everyone here knows, but have you talked to your parents? And 9 times out of 10, or probably like 9.9 times out of 10, they've already had a conversation with their parents. And then usually we'll be in sort of that place where we're changing the name on unofficial records. And then we have had some students who then will work with their family and say, I want to actually do a legal name change, and they go and they, go through the whole court process, and then they will actually bring us documentation of a legal name or a legal gender change. And then we will actually update the records at that point, once we have that legal court order that shows that.
Okay.
So the next slide talks about the student record conundrum that we've been spending a lot of time on. Actually, can we go on to the next slide? There we go. Thank you. And the Department of Ed leans really heavily on allowing the student to take the lead on updating those unofficial student records and telling the student about the potential risk, and trying the hardest to work with the student to encourage the conversation with the family and helping them to do so. The CDE also does walk a fairly thin line in explaining that there are times where this information may need to be shared with others, such as a school counselor or even a parent, if there is some specific and compelling need to know. And that usually would refer to as a safety concern, that the student is at risk of harming themselves if we don't share this information with a third party or with the parent. And so let's go to the next slide. And so some of the best practices involve encouraging the students to take the lead, offering to help them, starting with a supportive family member that can help sort of break that seal in the conversation, informing them ahead of time if you are going to utilize that compelling need to know or based upon a mandate, so that if you feel that the student is at risk of harming themselves and you feel like you have an obligation to tell a parent or a third party like a counselor of the potential risk of harm to the student, that you would tell the student, I am going to do this because I fear for your safety and I'm not equipped to protect your safety, and I feel that I need to tell a doctor, I need to tell a counselor, so on and so forth. And again, because of the potential conflict with our state and federal laws related to access to student records, really explaining carefully to students as carefully as you can, that even if they don't wish to tell their parents of this information, that as they utilize a chosen name, a chosen pronoun, that if it seeps into their unofficial records, it is likely that the parents will nevertheless know. And so it would be better to have that careful conversation with the assistance of a school counselor or other trusted adults at the school site. And then I just put a little smattering of some upcoming legislation. This is certainly not exhaustive. I think like 50 hits came up, and so I picked just a handful, just to give you a sense of where the state is going. AB 957 I thought was interesting, is that in determining child custody issues, it's looking to require that a court consider whether or not a parent is affirming a child's identity or gender expression as part of considering what's in the best interest of the student by way of custody issues. HR 57 is Assembly's adoption as August as Transgender History Month. Senate Bill 857 is requiring an advisory task force to identify the needs of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer questioning, and plus pupils to make recommendations to implement supportive policies and initiatives to address their education and well-being. And that task force will then lead to required training and professional development. That task force should be in place in the laws related to training by January 1st, 2026. Moving on to the next slide. AB 2023 would require that any petition, my apologies, that comes from doing a lot of special education law, I say petitioner too much, typed that wrong. Any petition to change the gender and sex identifier or name filed by a student, by a child under the age of 18 is kept confidential by the court. However, in this legislation, it acknowledges except to parents or their attorneys. And then I put that quote in from the confidentiality legislation, just to talk about the reasoning of the legislation and the statistics that they quote. I think some of the statistics that are quoted here are so astonishing and so overwhelming that they bear repeating over and over again, so that there's an understanding of why we do these trainings and discussions. And then the proclamation of September 2023, that's now, as Suicide Prevention Awareness Month by the Assembly Committee. Moving on to the next slide. And then AB 5 goes along with that task force around training for strategies to support LGBTQIA plus students and documentation of that training starting in the 25-26 school year. And then AB 1078, which is the legislation I discussed earlier, which would prevent banning any instructional materials. Questions? I know that was a very fast dive through, a perusal.
All right, fine, one more.
Go for it, Shanta.
Is some version of this presentation going to be shared with our staff?
Yes, so we're looking at doing similar types of workshops for staff. Lisa made mention of the LGBTQ mandatory training. We actually had that for all staff earlier this year as part of our rollout of this year's mandatory training. But we were gonna do kind of a deeper dive into especially for, it applies to all academies, but I think our PFA, ECA, and leading edge teachers, just given that they're working with middle and high school populations, this is coming up a little bit more often than it might for an elementary teacher.
Agreed, and I think also because there's a lot of information in the news, as we know, like we get sound bites, and I think we have an understanding of what's happening, but it's just a little bit of an understanding. I think it's helpful to do the trainings just to clarify. I mean, I think that, even I was not really aware of what was going on in Rockland and until I started prepping for this training. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's an important topic, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. You're popular.
Hang out now.
Very good. Are you ready for the next item?
No.
Everyone need to take a
Alright.
stretch break?
Yeah. Candy break, stretch break, yeah.
We can take it, we can
You
do it.
guys, I'm sorry I didn't excuse you. I think that was good info. You're more than welcome to stay. Or you can go. This.
I think Ms.
We'll
Holmes.
be, it'll be back next time for you, so you know where to sit. Thank you, Milo, for coming.
Thanks, Milo.
Appreciate you being here.
Good job.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. What's up next? Action items. Approval of Board of Directors Appointment Committee and review of terms.
Review terms. So it is September, exciting time of the year. The leaves are getting ready to change. It's not gonna be 100 degrees anymore, it's starting to be dark at board meetings.
I know.
It's also that time of year where we review our board of director terms. So typically, the way our flow is that every October we're renewing terms. So we do have some terms that'll be coming up for renewal next month. So we have Priti being renewed, Nita being renewed, Maria being renewed, Sean being renewed, and Ashante is leaving us, so she will not be getting renewed. But then we also need to fill our PFAA, ECA parent representative position. So Gina is no longer a PAC parent. Did I say, sorry, wrong P. PAC ECA parent rep, I apologize. Gina's no longer a PAC parent, she's now a PFA parent. So that position has actually been posted. Ziba's actually been sending out weekly updates to families. So we have a couple of candidates that have applied so far. So we need to form an appointment committee. So an appointment committee is typically 3 members of the board. And the job of the appointment committee is to interview qualified candidates and then make a recommendation to the board for who we should move forward for that open position. Question?
Gina's moving to community rep.
Gina's planning on moving to a community rep position. Yeah, she was gonna remain with the board, assuming the board wants to, have her transition to that role, of course, but that's her plan.
Okay, I will volunteer.
Okay,
Volunteer as well.
okay.
I'll volunteer.
So, yeah.
So you done?
Quick, I was like, that may be the fastest that's ever happened.
I love it.
We all
I like when my emails get read.
So later, so tomorrow, I'll likely send you some holds for your calendars. We're gonna nail down some dates for when the actual interviews are gonna be, but I'll send some holds to you, just so that we make sure you have that accounted for.
What dates are we looking at?
We're looking at September 27th. This is what we have, we're holding on the calendar right now. So September 27th from 3 to 6 p.m. and September 28th from 3 to 6 p.m. We are not gonna need all 6 hours. Our goal would actually be to consolidate probably till the 27th. And try to be most efficient, but just in case we get a flurry of applicants from PACT and ECA, we wanna sort of have that. And then this is a formal action item, so there does need to be like a motion and an approval. Motion and second.
Okay, what are we, for the committee?
So you're approving the board of directors appointment committee.
May I have a motion to approve the board of directors appointment committee? I second it. Thank you, Maria. Roll call vote. Maria?
Yes.
Ashante?
Yes.
Jennifer, yes. Doug? Yes. Sean?
Yes.
Nita? Okay. Next up, updated board of directors meeting calendar for 2015.
So you guys will all be really sad to know that Ziva and I are gonna work really hard with Anita and everyone else on the admin team to not have a January board meeting. So, sorry, I didn't bring Kleenex. Really exciting, especially January 8th, like the day after we get back from winter break. I know you all wanted to be here, but anyway, so we would like to modify the board calendar that you had previously approved to not have the January 8th meeting date. And then, so December 11th, Monday night, December 11th is our December board meeting date, and we were all good to go with that until Friday, or maybe it's Thursday. We learned that we do our annual night at the Kings game where the kids perform the halftime show, and we have the taiko drummers at the entrance and stuff. The only night that they can do it is on Monday, December 11th. And we all want to go to NCS night at the Kings game. So what we were asking the board is if we could look at either moving to the Tuesday night the week before, so that'd be December 5th, or just one day over December 12th. Anita did share with me today that she would really appreciate December 12th if possible, just because it makes, gives her a little bit of extra time with first interim. But if we absolutely can't do December 12th, we'll work really hard to make December 5th work.
Anyone? Do we have to decide on that now?
Yes.
Yes.
I prefer the 12th.
Okay.
I would think 12.
Oh, all right, Anita, you might get it.
All right,
So we would do December 12th, yeah.
and are we putting January 11th change into that motion as well?
Yeah, you could just say, make a motion to change the 2024 calendar.
May I have a motion to approve the updated board of directors meeting calendar for 23-24? I so move. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Doug. Roll call vote, Nita. Nita? You're welcome. Sean?
Yes.
Doug? Jennifer, yes. Ashante? Dr. Mamron? Yes. Okay.
And so just for the record, we're canceling the January meeting date, and the December meeting date now becomes December 12th.
And for the record, it is not that we don't want to be here in January. It's just that there's a lot of competing priorities around that time of year. We all love being here. For the record, yeah, for the record. FTR.
Yeah.
All right. Nina.
Yes, okay,
Oh, you're
Ziva's
not
gonna get our slides up and stuff too.
The presentation.
Presentation, that would be great, and we'll have the financial reports on the end. But I wanted to start off saying, Joe told me I had 10 minutes or less, but I listened to a lot of interesting information that you have dissected and stuff. And so I'm gonna go through this very quickly, but I want to spend most of my time going on excess revenues over expenditures and our fund balance. And also, to me, this is, Steve, you can go to the next slide for our standard highlights of what we touch base on this presentation. But also, what I want to focus on is at the beginning of 22-23, the board got together and did your strategic planning and stuff. And we had a really good this year. And you'll see that we have accomplished a lot on your list that I'm excited to tell you about on there. So Ziba, if you want to start, we're going to go over some major revenue factors for the local control funding formula. As a reminder, we got this like super COLA. So the actual cost of living adjustment was 6.56%. Plus they added a 6.7% augmentation to that. So together over 13% in our unrestricted funds. Our official CBEDS enrollment was 1,869, and our funded average daily attendance was 1,787, which equates to about 96% average daily attendance, which is a little lower than what we normally have run prior to COVID, but we fared very well compared to other districts. And then we also received lots of state categorical funds and local funds. But if you can go to the next slide. This is the outline of our 26 million in revenues. And you notice that for a local control funding formula, we got almost $20 million in stuff. And so of that, about over 500,000 was a prior year adjustment. So when we adopted this budget at the beginning of June of 2022, instead the governor said, oh, I'm going to do a prior year adjustment to give you some hold harmless money back in 2021 for COVID enrollment decreases and average daily attendance, which that was over 400,000 on there, plus some other prior year adjustments. Landed up being over 500,000. We already planned that at our first interim and we gave one-time bonuses and stuff on that. But that's the reason why that is so high. See, if you go to the next slide, this is our pie chart here. Still 72% of all our revenues comes from students attending class. The other highlight too to note is that of the local control funding formula, it's 3 pots of money. Property tax, it's about 19%. That funds that 19 million. And we got 6% for Education Protection Act, which is the sales tax, Proposition 55. And then the state makes up that other difference to get to the 72%. Lottery still at about 2% of our total revenues. And special ed funds are now at 5%. And then the rest of the 21% is a mix of federal, state categoricals, and local funds. So if you go to the next slide. For expenditures, we spent over $23 million. And one thing on the individual categories, I wanted to point out is capital outlay. So during the year, we had 3 facility projects that the board approved. The biggest one was the PACT Phase 2, 20% remodeling of the remainder of the upstairs. Our Black Rock fencing project for safety reasons, and then some design costs for the Black Rock expansion project. And so we did spend over 821,000 in that area. And then I'll talk about that some more on here. So Ziba, if you go to the next slide, our pie chart here, we are at 79% of our total expenditures for salary and benefits. If you were to pull out that capital outlay, it'd probably go up to about 81%, which is around the norm of what we have been running for total expenditures on that. And then 3% for our MOU fees with the district that gets passed on to the district on there. So if you go to the next slide. What I wanted to do also was Ziba was going to bring up our financial documents, just unaudited actuals, just to pause to make sure that if you can go to Ziba, I've got my notes here. Okay, so in your board packet, starting on page 93, is the financial reports and stuff. So if you scroll down, Ziba, to page 97, as a reminder, this is a state required form. So this is the alt form certification that Joe will be signing off on that goes to the district after you approve and the county office. If you go to page 98, you'll see this previously was an Excel document. It is now state software on here. And so it's taking our normal financial reports and it's breaking it out into what's unrestricted dollars versus restricted, and then you get a total
Can I
column.
pause you for just a second?
Yes.
Do you guys need a minute to find this page?
Yes.
Yeah,
So
okay.
page 98
Yes.
in the digital file on your iPad. And it's this really exciting looking document. that's
Yeah, it goes on for
together.
several pages. So I just wanted to kind of show you, because this is something that is required. It's been required, but now the state moved it to part of the SACS reporting software for charter schools. So this goes on through page 102, but I want Ziba to scroll down to page 100, the top, so that you can kind of see right here, breaking it down. Okay, so is that the top of page 2? Okay, right here. So on this page, it will list our beginning fund balance, and you can see how it's broken out by restricted and unrestricted, and then our ending fund balance by each category. Below is how the state wants us to categorize our fund balance components. Keep going down, Ziva. Okay. And then a little farther down towards the bottom of the page is our actual balance sheet. How much cash did we actually have in the buckets? Total assets, liabilities, and fund balance. And so, plus a lot of other stuff towards the end. But if you go to page 103, this starts our financial statements that you guys are used to. Okay, so we'll refer back to this because go down just a little bit. When we get to the fund balance, I wanted to make sure that we go over this section here, according to our fiscal policy on that. So that's what you guys are used to seeing. The rest of the packet is all the standard format that we have on here. So Ziva, if you can hop on over to the presentation, the summary slide. Okay, perfect. So this table here is just comparing what we thought we were going to close the books, our estimated actuals that was reported at the time that we adopted the budget. And then the middle column is what we actually closed the books with. And then there's a variance column. So for our revenues, you can kind of compare the two. And we got almost an additional 500,000 in revenues. So that we weren't expecting. Of that, the county always does a settle up for the treasury pool. And so because we've had more cash in the bank and interest, one good thing about inflation, interest rates go up. So we got almost a little over 300,000 more in interest revenue than we were expecting, because we've been increasing it throughout the year and stuff, but they always do this settle up at the end of the year. And then of course, the 100,000 extra for the prior year LCF adjustment pretty much makes up that. Where you'll see is the noticeable variance right here is in expenditure. So we underspent by 3.1 million. And of that, there's various reasons for that. So of that, over 1.15 of that is unspent state and federal categorical funds. So it's money that came with strings. We didn't finish it. We're planning to spend it throughout the years and stuff. So that was an underspent in our budget. The other one with over $1 million for our facility projects and stuff too. So the construction didn't get done by June 30th, so we're going to carry it over to the next year. The other big savings, over almost 760,000, was related to underspending in programs that require contributions, mainly like special ed was the bulk of it. We also have our LCAP supplemental dollars, which we usually underspend about 100 grand there and stuff. And so that left about little under 300,000 of miscellaneous general underspending on there. So when we go to book these carryovers, it's important for you to know that that then you will see at first interim, so thank you for giving me more time, I would say, when you do that. At first interim, between now and first interim has the most changes because We've adopted a budget, we've guessed at who we're gonna hire, who we're gonna fill, everything. We closed the books, we didn't spend categoricals in 1 year, so now it's gonna go to the next year, finishing facility projects. So you will see that we will have some planned deficit spending coming up for first interim, because you're taking at least 2 million of that, putting it on the books. Now we're deficit spending and we're spending down that fund balance on there. So, Ziva, if you can flip back over to that page 103,
The packet.
the packet. That's where you see our itemized fund balance on here. So, and I've been, wait, it's the page previous to this. Ziva. Okay, right here, yeah.
Can you zoom in on that bar? Yeah.
Yes, okay, so on the ending fund balance distribution, I broke it out based on our policy. Operational reserves versus program reserves. So that top section there, it's showing there's our 10% rounded of economic uncertainties, the 2.3 million, our cash and bank and revolving over 282. We have 6,000 for cash reserves for operating purposes, 6 million, I'm sorry. And then, sorry about that. And then over 330,000 unrestricted lottery and undesignated, which means we haven't really earmarked it for anything, is over 470,000. So that block up there is about 41% of our total expenditures. Now, our fiscal policy states about 35%, so we're a little over on that. All the rest of this is earmarked or assigned for certain things. So we were able to put in more facility reserves. That includes the $1 million or so for the carryover that we allocated in 22-23, finish up those projects and meet our other facilities goals. Then the restricted categorical programs is over $2 million. We still have 100,000 left for our tech plan for refreshing, special education program reserves, 200,000 for our post retirement benefits and STRS and PERS reserves, 800,000. Unrestricted programs, that is for local things that have carryover. Expanded learning program, for example, is an unrestricted program. So that's why, but we know that has strings across. And then we have the 1.8 million for salaries and benefits. So as a reminder, we set up some of these reserves with the board in the past for example, salary and benefits to avoid or delay layoffs in the event that the economy turns. If we have unusually large special ed placements or something like that, or we need to refresh a computer lab that got damaged. So we earmark all of those things, plus our goals for facility projects in the future. So that's kind of where that is. We always try to make it open. Now, the state may have me putting these things in their own categories of assigned and things like that. But this is for us to show this is where the pots of money are that we have designated, so that we fully know what we're doing with it and stuff too. So, Ziva, if you can go back to the presentation. So the next slide is just a pie chart of our fund balance components, just a percent, the percentage. Okay. Yeah, there you go. Of just the fund balance. So you can see that our other reserves are like 44% of the total fund balance. If you go to the next slide here. I wanted to highlight some of the things that we've accomplished during last year and stuff too. So with that large compounded COLA, we received over $1,304.74 more than we did the previous year per pupil, average daily attendance and stuff. The average was over $10,000 per student. We also received additional special ed funds. The SELFA worked to pass a lot of those special CARES Act funds to all of their participating LEAs, and we benefited from that extra money. Our skate program did really well as well. And then, of course, we are participating in E-rate program where we're able to go out to bid and receive about 50% savings on those purchases, which is about $50,000 in this particular year for us. We used our balance of we received the balance of our educator effectiveness grant. So we have all that money. We also received 2 new big categorical programs, which is the Arts and Music Instructional Block Grant, as well as the Learning Recovery Block Grant. Then we found out later on that they're making cuts to us, but we received a lot of the money on here. And then the STRS on behalf entry is also reflected on our revenues. It's over 880,000, and that's that what I call the phantom entry that represents the state's liability for our STRS members, their unfunded liability, where you book revenues and expenses, it washes out to zero on your books on that. On the expenditure side, we were able to expand staff for special ed. We hired some teachers on special assignment. Technology, replacement plan, you can see that we purchased a lot, replacements for new, for Chromebooks, a data server, refreshing a couple of labs, replace iPads and Chromebooks as well, new computers for new staff. That STRS entry, and Ziba, if you go to the next one. On here, we funded our step and level increases for salaries. We provided a 2% increase to all salary schedules. We gave a 3% one-time bonus for staff. We were able to provide summer school and for expanded learning opportunities. We provided additional professional development for all our credentialed staff. And we also expanded our before and after school program opportunities and provided tutoring service. So all of this basically was under the guidance of your strategic plan, I could say, that we have. Cash-wise, we closed the books with $19.2 million. And you may ask, why do we have 19.2 million? Our fund balance is only 18 million. Oh, that's because the state gave us all of the learning recovery block grant money and then decided they were going to take back 50%. So we actually had to book a payable back to them. So we got it over almost 700,000 more than what we get to keep. But we're benefiting and we're going to earn interest on that too. So, anyway, good. Next one. So the next steps here is now that we close the books, we're going to be working on the first interim report, which will be also booking carryovers. Joe and I, as well as the administrative team, will be looking at what is truly restricted, what is free for ongoing funds, things like that, to address some of the other goals that that the board wants to address as far as your priorities go and stuff too. And we'll be bringing back a plan. We also may look at bringing something formal to you to assign or commit some dollars that you want to truly save for facilities, say, or something like that, that the board can take action on that. And then when you do take that official action, it actually shows on the books that the board took an action and is in a special category. So, but those are the type of things that we'll be working on right now. We will be coming back to you on December 12th for approval for first interim, and then back in March prior to the 15th for second interim. And then we'll start closing the books all over again and in between adopt next year's budget. I know that was probably over 10 minutes.
You're good.
Yes.
Sean?
So keeping our strategic plan in mind, what are some of these available monies for like ongoing employee compensation and salaries? Because I'm hearing a lot of underspending.
Right. So underspending depends on what you underspend for. So for example, on contributions, a large chunk of that was special education. And that was mainly, I want to say, due to staffing. So for example, can't find some staff, late start staff. Then in what the number of, say, paraprofessionals that we planned for last year, not that we don't necessarily need them this year. So they're, so we need some adjustments in there. But you have to kind of look at on the underspending, is it because it's a restricted one and it has to be spent on something and it'll carry over and you'll spend it later? Or is it just one-time savings because like it's hard to hire staff? I mean, we're finding not just special ed, but we're finding it in all the places, even substitutes and stuff like that. So we need to really look, is it truly an ongoing savings? And that's what we're gonna be doing between now and first interim. The category that says undesignated or unappropriated, that's what we've identified as ongoing right now that we know of. As far as
the 1 point,
no, it was, if you go to page 103 on your.
Can you bring this back up, the reserves part,
What page number?
103?
Yeah,
That one, you got it right there, perfect.
yeah, there you go, yeah. Okay, so that 470,535, where it says undesignated, undistributed, that there is right now my guesstimate on ongoing funds that have not been identified yet.
okay,
So, or you can consider a contingency, whatever it is, on that piece. And then remember our multi-year projection, we have planned for some, well, normally we have planned for all step and professional level adjustments and things like that. We would come back to you to make a recommendation if we want to look at further increases for the staff. One of the things that that could be possible too is what are some of the areas in our program reserves that we want to reallocate and use and maybe spend over a multi-year period to address some things, depending on what the board's priorities are.
So, and to provide a little bit more detail to what Anita's talking about, so I'm gonna actually go to the screen.
Yeah.
Too many years of being a teacher, I can't not go touch the screen. So you see down here in this program reserve section, we have some funds allocated in different ways. And a lot of this allocation really comes from lessons learned from the last recession, right? So some areas that we could revisit as a board is we have this 1.8 million in reserve for salary and benefits and this 800,000 in reserves for STRS and PERS. Those are really there so that like if in the middle of a school year, the legislature, the governor were to come back and say, just kidding, we actually weren't getting all the revenues that we thought we were getting, and we're going to cut you mid-year, which happened almost every year during the last recession that we navigated. These are sort of, I think of these as our shock absorber funds a little bit, right? That we wouldn't have to make those changes. We could look at spending some of that down, as Anita was saying, over a couple of years. It would give us, if you will, less of a shock absorber, should the economy change. But it would be a way that we could potentially free up some funds from our fund balance and, reallocate to additional compensation beyond whatever COLA we're receiving from the state. Every year, just if we just think about step and level changes on the salary schedule for all employees, that's usually a 2 to 3% cost to the organization. So when the governor comes out with like, oh, we're going to do a 3% COLA, we're like, okay, good, we can make step and column adjustments and that sort of thing. But if we wanted to offer raises on top of that, either we need a larger COLA or we need to be looking at pulling out some money from our reserves. I almost think it's like our savings account a little bit. The other thing to remember too is this facilities reserve right here says 4.3, let's say 4.4 million. 1.1, 1.2 of that is actually already earmarked. That's us finishing the PAC project. It's here as just the carryover process. So this amount is really closer to like 3.3, 3.4, let's say. And this is for all of the projects that we have tentatively designed for this campus. This is where we need to increase that fund to about 10 million. So remember, what we're looking at on this campus with building the new leading edge building and that new theater building is about a $30-ish million project. We've received $15 million in grant dollars plus $5 million loan, but there's a $10 million gap there that ideally, based on historical practices, that's where we work with the school district on passing a bond, and that $10 million would come out of local bond dollars. And should the district decide to go down that path, that might be a way that we could access those resources. Realistically, we're probably going to find ourselves in a position where we need this money before the district is ready to have passed a bond. And so one of the things we'll be talking about in October is this BlackRock, master plan. And one of the conversations we have for the granting agency where we receive the grant funds for is like, would there be a way we could scale this or phase this without losing significant grant dollars? And maybe hypothetically, like we do phase 1 is the new leading edge classroom building, phase 2 is that new theater building. And so in phase 1, we get that done with the money that we have, the grant money a little bit here. And phase two, that's where we're kind of waiting on the school district to pass a bond. But a conversation that we can definitely have as a board is like how we have these funds allocated, and we can kind of talk a little bit, because I think a lot of these allocation accounts, especially these program reserve accounts, these are things that we set up probably before many of you were board members, because they're sort of like holdovers from the last recession. Like when we were like, oh yeah, we had to cut the technology budget. We couldn't replace everyone's computers that year. Like we've kind of have some of that historical thing. Or since we've become our own LEA for special education, we have this $200,000 amount sitting here. Realize that's one student going into a residential treatment center.
Yeah.
Like that's actually $200,000 in special ed dollars is not very much. So like this would be one where I would say, it doesn't look like, it sounds like a lot of money right there, but it actually isn't an amount of money. We should probably keep it there. But then Anita can also talk to us a little bit about, the economic uncertainty and even, like cash reserves, like we've talked about before. This isn't, unfortunately the state doesn't provide us funding like we all get paychecks, right? Like we all get like kind of 1/12 of our pay, every month, right? That's not how the state actually funds schools. They give us a pot of money here, and then they wait a bunch of months and give you another pot of money there. And so you need those cash reserves to kind of have, to be able to make payroll. Because people don't want to be paid in the way in which the state pays.
Right.
They don't really like their paychecks, right?
Yeah, and again, the operating reserve piece and stuff are, according to our fiscal policy, we are striving for 35% minimum and hoping to get up to the higher ones. That's 41%, so we're like 6% over, right? But it's not really a lot. But when someone looks at our fund balance and says, oh, but if your total fund balance is 82% of your total expenditures, you can say, okay, but we have these other priorities, right? Which can change whatever you guys decide. Okay. Any other questions?
The one thing I did want to bring up, just, make sure everyone understands. So Anita referred to categorical funds. So remember, we get our local control funding formulas. That's like a certain dollar amount that we get for every student. Then we get some supplemental funds on top of it if students qualify, like for free or reduced lunch, or they're an English learner, or that sort of thing. And that makes up the bulk of our general funding. Then the categorical dollars that she's talking about, these are some of the programs that we've, all these different COVID plans that we've had to do, right? Educator effectiveness. Another one was the arts instructional materials grant.
A to G grant.
A to G grant. And those have all been pots of money that we have very intentionally not just spent in 1 year. Like we've said, okay, we have 5 years to spend it out, let's spread it over 5 years. So like, for instance, some of the money that we're using for our summer school, if we'd spent that all in 1 year, then we wouldn't be able to offer summer school programs in future years. Similar sorts of ideas with some of our before and after school programming dollars, and that sort of thing. We very intentionally spread them out because Natomas Charter School doesn't have a population that would receive those ongoing funds in an ongoing basis. Compared to schools and districts across the state, like we actually have a more affluent student population or student population with less academic needs than we might find in other schools. And then the one pot of money that we didn't receive this year at all was the equity multiplier dollars. So those were funds that were set aside specifically to support African-American students in schools that had a high percentage of students qualifying for free and reduced lunch. So I believe it was 80%, I think was the free and reduced lunch cutoff. I can't remember if it was 80 or 90%.
Only 600 schools qualify.
Yeah, our free and reduced lunch count is around 27%. So our school didn't qualify for the equity multiplier dollars as a result.
How do we assess our free or reduced lunch now that
Such
we
a
don't
great
do
question.
the forms?
So it's a real,
Yeah.
so what we do is we ask everyone to fill out, we call it the alternate income form as part of the application enrollment process. And so that data can actually be used to determine whether a student will qualify for free or reduced lunch in the state of California.
Okay.
There's a separate national school lunch form, which all of you probably have also filled out at some time in your parenting careers. That's actually a form that the federal government uses. I appreciate the legislature making sure that every student gets free or reduced lunch, but giving everyone free lunch has actually completely messed up the way we collect data and making sure that schools are funded appropriately.
Right.
Like our actual, from a demographic standpoint, the Natomas Charter School technically got wealthier during the pandemic. Like we had fewer kids qualifying for free and reduced lunch. And we know that wasn't actually the case. What actually just happened is there wasn't an incentive to fill out these forms anymore.
Because we're all
Because we're all getting free lunch. So why am I filling out the form? So, you do get other benefits, like if you like tuition, college application fee waivers or SAT fee waivers and that sort of thing. So we do try to educate families. Also, for our middle and high school population, they get free before and after school programs. So SCAPE or Knights Landing on this campus, there are, we call it ELOP, but Extended Learning Opportunity Grant dollars that are now funding that program. And the way that program works is that if a student qualifies for free or reduced lunch, they get that program for free. So we've actually had families saying, hey, I can't really afford the program, I'd like a scholarship. And we're like, well, just fill out this form and we can guarantee that the program will be free, and it does result in supplemental funding for the school that we could use in a myriad of different ways. But as we've talked about in previous meetings, like looking at our compensation study, schools in our region get funded at different levels because they're serving different populations. And if Natoma's charter school's free and reduced lunch population could just look like NP3 or Westlake, we would automatically have about an additional $1.8 million in school funding. And so it is interesting because I don't think we demographically think of our schools being that different than Westlake or that different than NP3. And we're definitely not different in terms of the services that we're providing. I would say in many cases, we are often providing services that are even greater. But because we have fewer families participating in that program, then our funding is different.
And is it fewer families are participating in the program because they just don't qualify for the program, or have we still noticed a decrease in the families that are completing the form so that we can assess if they qualify?
I would say this year, it's the first. Fewer people are qualifying.
Right.
Because the way we set up the alternate income form this year in the enrollment packet, you had to work really hard not to fill it out.
Okay.
Because we
So
really, we really want everyone to fill it out. I mean, if you don't qualify, great, that's fine. But just trying to make sure that a lack of completing the form is not necessarily the problem. But everyone is experiencing, everyone being NP3, Westlake, the school district, Twin Rivers, we are all experiencing the same problem. Like in Natomas' case, they actually dipped below a significant threshold in terms of these concentration dollars this year, and that's costing them significantly.
Yeah, it's leaving money on the table
Yep.
that could be going
Yep.
to support students.
Yep.
Yes, historically though, so since I've been here about 10 years or so, we have gradually have increased, because we used to be low 20% and stuff. And we only have limited points of entry into our school, that's the other thing as well. So it's gonna be a slow climb for us unless we change our whole, a lot of students leave and we replace them with new on there. But to the credit of our staff, they do a lot of follow-up to just maintain our consistent percentages because of this new law and stuff too. So we're hoping for that. And then we're calling it an education benefit to kind of attract.
Education benefit more, not we're making some nomenclature switches. Thank you, guys.
All right, may I have a motion to approve 2022-23 unaudited financial actuals?
So moved.
I'll second. Thank you. Did you get that, Ashante and Nita?
Yes.
Roll call vote, Nita?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Jennifer, me, yes. Ashante?
Yes.
Dr. Murado? Yes. Dr. Wood?
Enrollment report. So the next little item you have in your packet is our enrollment as of September 1st. Things are looking really strong. We're actually even over enrolled based on compared to our original budget in a couple places. So Leading Edge, PFAA, Star Academy, and ECA are actually all over enrolled compared to budget numbers. PACT is basically at where we were at, and they were actually a little bit under as of September 1st, but I know some more students have enrolled. This is like prime enrollment season, right? Because Census Day for us is the first Wednesday in October. So we want to have all of the seats filled, before that first Wednesday in October. So we're working hard on that right now.
Any questions? All right, moving on. First read board of policies. Dr. Wood?
Yes, so tonight in your packet, and I got all mixed up now, so I'm like,
And it's
in your packet tonight, we have a first read. So we have 3 policies. So we have board policy 5145.13, equity and access for LGBTQ students, board policy 6153, school sponsored trips, and board policy 6163.1, library media centers. In the case of all three policies, what you see before you tonight is Natomas Charter Schools historical practices in all three areas. The reason we put policies together in these three areas is these are areas that we've been getting questions from families or from staff, how do you handle this situation? Or how do you handle that situation? And our goal with these policies is just to be really open and transparent about how we handle these different situations. One, so families and students, are aware, but also to help staff, so there's just real clarity for them. And then as we have new staff that's coming on to sort of give them some guidance as well. So I think what we'll do just for like logistical sakes, we'll just kind of take one policy at a time. This is, as a first read, this is an opportunity for the board to provide feedback or suggestions for edits with the idea that it would come back next month as a second.
So I have some suggestions.
Okay.
There's a few spots, at least in the first policy,
Okay.
where we talk, at some points we're saying shall, at some points I think we even say must, and then there's other areas where we say should.
Okay.
And I think in the areas where we can get stronger with the language, we should do that.
Get stronger for clarity.
So just quick examples,
Yes.
page,
Yes, I have the actual word policy up, so as you speak, you're not gonna see it up here, I'm just gonna be following along with you on the back end.
I wouldn't see it if you
So,
project.
I'm just listening for your direction.
All right, so I'm not gonna catch all of them, but I know page 115, and you have to forgive me because I don't think I can see page numbers on here. The privacy and confidentiality paragraph.
Mhm.
It says schools, I think it's the second sentence, school staff should.
Okay.
I think we need to be more direct about that.
Okay.
There's another spot in the law, there's at least two more spots, restroom access and locker room access. Both are shoulds. And I know when we spoke with Lisa earlier tonight, it should be shall, or she gave an alternate, stronger language than should.
Yeah, shall or will, okay.
And I think that I'm confident I didn't catch all of them. But that's,
So what we could do for a second read is we can go through find all the shoulds and turn them to shalls, but we'll do it with like red text so you can kind of see where those changes are.
cool.
And then, but for these three policies, I want to make sure that we bring them back as discussion items next week. I know our normal is first read is discussion, second read is consent. But because these are kind of meaty policies, I think we should do two discussion, agendize it as discussion next month.
As action?
Action, sorry, yes,
Okay.
sorry, yes. I just meant not consent.
Correct, yeah, got it.
So we can actually talk about it. Other things in this first policy. So there's Jennifer's changing shoulds to shalls.
Any others for that policy? Comments, questions? Going once? Okay, so we're gonna bring it back to at the next meeting.
As an action item, yep.
Discussion.
Discussion.
It'll be an action item, which would allow for further discussion.
Oh.
And then if you guys choose to pass the policy at that point, you can. So remember, the difference between consent and action, consent, we're supposed to pass everything as one solid group and not discuss the items. But by agendizing it as action, then you guys can continue a discussion if you want to and choose whether or not you want to take action. If we agendize it only as discussion, then you can't actually pass the policy. Yeah.
All right. Anything else on this one? All right. School sponsored trips, I think, is the next one.
Mhm.
Okay.
AKA field trips.
Comments on that? We talked about Joe mentioned it earlier. I know I don't specifically. It was something in the.
Of the chaperones?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's under rooming assignments.
at the bottom of the page. A rooming assignment.
Oh, in the event a chaperone must enter a student sleeping
Yes.
location, chaperones must do so in teams of 2.
Yes.
What would you like us to add to that?
So I think that's great. I'm wondering if there's more language we need to include about not just sleeping locations.
Oh, so in the event a chaperone must, yeah, okay. So maybe, I think there was a separate chaperone section. Maybe, you wanna talk about like chaperones are not interacting with students individually in private spaces, basically?
Yes.
We could probably do it in the supervision of field trip and excursions. Or parent guardian, actually, we could do the parent guardian participation, like right above transportation. Maybe we add a clause about,
Well, and I think it shouldn't be limited just to parents.
oh, that's a good point.
Go be our staff as well.
Right.
Under the student ratio.
Maybe,
Yeah, maybe that might make sense. Or maybe that supervision of field trips.
Yeah, I mean, because we have that statement, like all school employees and chaperones shall not consume alcohol or controlled substances, like a parallel sentence that's like all school employees and chaperones. You want to say like, shall not be in private spaces with students alone?
Something to that effect, yeah.
Did you capture that? Okay, thank you for being a fast typist.
I thought I was reading wrong in this section about poisonous snakes.
No, it's a real thing.
It's a real thing.
It's a real thing. It was really in both legal templates. We were like, that's a thing, okay. Don't go anywhere where there's poisonous snakes. That's just what we all learned from that. Anything else about the school sponsored trips policy? Okay. So that the board is aware on the back end of this too, what we're also doing is updating like all of the field trip permission slips so that they match. Because we discovered as we were going through this process that, not everyone's using the same field trip form. So we're using this as a process to really, make clear, like, this is the form we use for all Natoma Charter School Academies. So,
In line with our insurance.
yes, yeah.
Okay, anything else on that one? Nope. Okay, library media centers. Is our third one, right?
And as I said at the beginning, these are practices that we already had in place, we just didn't have a policy that necessarily went with them.
I don't think I have anything on this one. Everybody good? Yep. All right.
All right, so we will bring back your edits for the October board meeting, and you'll do it in such a way so they can see really easily. I think this would be one too, that when Ziva does send that board packet out, if you catch anything between, Thursday or Friday when the board packet comes out and Monday, like typos, that sort of thing, just email the two of us and we will make sure, if it's something like a typo, we'll just fix it. But if it's something that's up for discussion, then we'll make sure to highlight it and have it there so that we can have a robust discussion on the 22nd.
All right. Laura.
Assessment results, you get to bring it home at the end.
Saving the best.
Awesome. Yay, I was so ready earlier.
That's all we're gonna
I know, I was like, it's me. Okay, so yes, best for last, nobody's tired, you guys are ready, need to shake
We're
it out.
having a great time, it's
Okay.
8:13.
All right, so we're looking at data and assessment updates. So you'll be getting some updates on some of our LCAP elements as well as our preliminary CAST results that we have. So first of all, I always like to start by looking at how do we know that students are learning? Because as we look at these state results, that is one indicator.
right, of what students are learning. So just keeping in mind as we look at this, that we're also looking at the projects, the accomplishments that our students are doing, the in-class things, the productions, the leadership event. There's lots of different things that denote success for our students in addition to this. And while we look at this data very carefully, we know it is not the only vision of our students. All right, next one, please. So exciting. California Dashboard is coming back this year. Last year, we just had the purple haze of giving our baseline for a lot of our indicators. So we're going back to the colors. So exciting. So as you look at this, these are the elements of the California State Dashboard, which is not out yet. But the top 4 indicators are local indicators. And so those are things that we do self-assessment on, looking at, do our students have access to curriculum? Do they have access to books? Do we have qualified teachers? A bunch of different elements there. And so I did submit that to the state, kind of do it in chunks, and we have met all of those top indicators. And then the next 5 that are kind of the purple color, those are things that are going to be coming out. We have not gotten the official data yet. And so those are coming. So just, this is like a commercial, very exciting, coming soon. But we will be getting the colors. And then the college career, because that one lags behind a year because it's based on graduate data. This year we will get our baseline data and then we'll get a color the year after that. So just to keep this super exciting, that's how it's going to roll out. Next one, please. So we do gather this data, the college and career and data locally as we look at our students. And because we also look at it as a part of our LCAP. Those are part of our LCAP goals, which is our local control and accountability plan. So if we look historically here, we have some data as far as how many students are getting more than one college class completed, which the Early College Academy is really helping with that, getting a lot of students into college classes. And a reminder, this is only the graduating class of 2023 that we're looking at there. So it's only, I think, 106 kids. And so we went up 12% in the last year, which is really wonderful. We're about the same with our A through G, our CTE pathways, and our seal of biliteracy. So we're holding strong there and hoping to continue to grow there. Next one, please. 120 seniors total. So then we also have, looking at the college and career readiness indicator by looking at different subgroups. And so what we'll see here is that we don't have the 2023 data yet because this is actually data that comes from the state. And it's a little bit mysterious how they determine it. So I don't have that magic wand. So we'll be waiting for that, but that'll be coming soon. Those groups that are listed there are numerically significant for the graduation class because you're looking at 120 kids. And so if you don't have 10 of a group, it's not really going to show up in the data. But what we do have is that we had 100% graduation rate for the class of 2023. So awesome, especially thinking about COVID hit during their freshman year, right? So these are kids that there was a lot of opportunities for not passing classes and not completing work, and they all did it. So we're very, very proud of that and all of the hard work that they put in because a few of them had some stuff to make up, but they did it. We had some credit recovery over the summers and after school, and they did it. So very proud of them all. Okay, next one, please. And then college acceptance rates, which is really great as well for this group. We dropped a little bit as far as how many students applied to the universities, but down 6%. having been a parent of a senior last year and talking with many, many people across the Sacramento area about this, from my perspective on it is that this was really it's an economic choice. There were a lot of families, especially as our families get experience with the community college system and their students, and they see, hey, this is small school, nice student to teacher ratio, my kid can get a really good start to their education. We had a lot of families that were just choosing to send their student directly to community college.
It's free.
Yeah, and it's free. Yeah, and the kid gets to live at home. There's a lot of benefits. As a mom of someone whose child just went away, I'm like, oh, that would have been so smart. Anyway, but our college acceptance rates went up about 2%, so we're up to 97%. So that means the students that applied to the four-year university, 97% of them got it. So that's
Can I just
really
add
awesome.
one thing before you move on from here?
Yeah.
So when Laura presented this data to our administrative team, was that last week? Gosh, yeah, Thursday, yeah, told her. And one of the things that we've been talking about is even changing the way we track this data right now. We've always just tracked the percentage of students applying to a four-year college. But as Laura's saying, one of the real benefits of the dual enrollment program that we have is more and more kids are leaving our high school already sort of set up and functional at AR. And I'm like, well, I'm just gonna stay here like one more year and finish my general ed and do the transfer agreement process and are saving significant money. So we're gonna kind of look at how we can track that data a little differently, because someone reading that from the outside may be like, oh, there's something wrong. They went down by 6 percentage points. Actually, no, there's something great happening right there, which is that families are really trying to figure out what's going to economically work best for my kid and leverage the options that we have in our community, which if you know anyone who lives in another state, not every state has this. So we are so fortunate that in California, our students can go to a 2-year community college program for completely free and then use the transfer agreement process for guaranteed admissions into a CSU or a UC. So, and then in the case of Natomas Charter and other high schools, we're giving them the experience in high school to actually take the classes, get familiar with the system, meet the counselors that are over there. So they're ready to go,
It's amazing. I've been reading the National Honor Society applications. I'm a part of that team, and woo, some of these kids have taken a lot of college classes. One kiddo was saying, I've taken 30, units of college classes, and I was like, okay.
Well, I was gonna say that Kim's not here, but the sophomore class at ECA is going to be a class where a significant number of the kids, if they continue on their path, will actually have their lower division community college work complete when they graduate from high school. So the lower division general ed part complete, we're pretty excited for that, right? Because then they need to do some major coursework, but then they could transfer after that.
Now, we just need the transfer agreement.
Yes,
That'd be nice.
well, the community college do have the tag or the transfer agreement guarantee, and that's something that we really push all of our students to know about that are going into the community college.
But if our ECA students, I'm just thinking those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so you have to do
they did.
IGETC, the general ed part and the major coursework, so they would have to do the major coursework, but I'm the beneficiary, I'm a product of a tag agreement, like I went to Yuba College, did my 2 years and then transferred into Davis in molecular and cellular biology. And all through that process, so the poor seniors, they get to hear from a lot. I'm like, did you ask about the transfer agreement process?
That's a part of every conversation, so, yes. All right, next one, please. Okay, so we're gonna be looking at our CASP scores here. So overall, big picture, we're seeing some growth in ELA. We're seeing overall kind of flat in math. And so our focus area will continue to be math. And then we are seeing still some disparity in our subgroups that we've been looking at. So, but looking ahead, as I said, this is just preliminary data. It's not the official state data yet. And so that will be coming out mid-October. I hope they bring it out before we release it, or at least let me see it before we have our next board meeting. At our next board meeting, we're going to look at the academy specific data and look at where are we headed, what are the things that we're doing specifically to address the different needs. So I'm currently in the process of working on the academy data with the principals and having their staff look at it and everything. One of the interesting things is that to the state and all of the dashboards and things, we are one school, TK through 12. But for our use and for really impacting the students, we are 5 schools. And so we have to individually pull all of that out. And so we're in the process of that
And
as
before
well.
you move forward, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to give her a lot of kudos. Because all of the data you're about to see, Laura and her team had to take spreadsheets of individual student data and try to manipulate them into results that actually make sense. So we can start talking about programming, because the state has not released any of that. All they've given us is spreadsheets of 1,100 students, individual data, all in code too, because it can't just say something simple like Michael Wood on it. It's gotta be like ID numbers, and this test 6 is the science test, and test 2 is the English. So I wanna give her a lot of kudos before we go to the next part, because it is a lot of data analytics and analysis that we can even look at these results right now. And because they're not official state results, they could adjust a few percentage points here or there, but it gives us enough to understand the patterning so that we can hit the ground running and be thinking about what programmatic changes do we already need to make, what supplemental things do we want to add, and that sort of thing. So, kudos to Laura.
And kudos to my husband who deals with me when I'm sitting there going, how can I get this data? How can I? And his Excel knowledge helps me always. So, all right, going to the next one. So we'll start with our LPAC, which is one of our state tests. Of course, these are our emergent bilinguals, our students that speak more than one language. Go ahead to the next one. So looking at our scores big picture, the vast majority of our students are scoring in the 3 and 4 area, which you need a 4 to start to be considered for reclassification. But we are seeing an uptick in new to US and California schools. Students coming in at the very lowest level of English learners, which has not been historically something that we have. And so we're seeing an uptick in that, which I think is fabulous, because that means that families are telling other families as they're coming here, hey, get your students into this school because it'll be a good place to help them. So that's kind of the big picture of it. And then when you break it down by grade level, you see the red there is all of our students scoring a 4. So when we have brand new students coming in at TK or kindergarten, we test them, all brand new students to California education. If they are marked as speaking another language, they have to do what's called an initial assessment. So we give that to them within the first 30 days of them entering school. And with our kindergartners, we actually do it before school starts. When they meet the teacher and they kind of do that, so that way the teacher has an idea of where they are. But what we often find, especially with the TK and definitely with the kindergartners, is they're like, what? Test? Huh? What are you asking me? Because they don't really have the school concept. So a lot of them qualify as English learners. And then, so you'll see here, half of them by the end of kindergarten got a 4. And so we can look at reclassifying them. And then you'll see as we get up to 5th grade, we get most of those students are getting reclassified. So we're able to work with them, build their skills, and then get them to be designated as English proficient. When you look at grade 6, you see a big uptick in the number of ELs. That is one of our major entry points, right? We go from having about 100 students to having 250 possibly students. So we really jumped there. That's one of our entry points. So we're getting an infusion of students who are emergent bilinguals from other schools flowing into the system. And then you'll see that we work through and support those students to get reclassified through middle school. And then we have another uptick in 9th grade where we get another influx of students. But we are really working to support our students. There are our emergent bilingual TOSA, Alyssa Ortiz-Khan, has been doing excellent work working with teachers, working with students, working with our ELAC community, which we're meeting on September 19th. Come on out, Parents United, woohoo, we'll be at Star Academy this year. And so but working with them to provide designated supports and support our students to get them reclassified. So we're really excited, and that will be coming in our future. We have to do a handful of things to reclassify students, but we have, I think she said there were 38 students that are up for reclassification, or no, 19 for sure and 38 possibles. We have to look at how they're doing in their classes and their other test scores and talk to their parents and teachers. So anyway, I'm very proud of them. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so I already talked a little bit about our school-wide CASP scores. We saw some great things. We saw 5th and 8th graders have had some growth in English language arts. We had some growth in our inclusive education or special education students in English language arts, as well as our, you'll see SED here, and that's socioeconomically disadvantaged students. So those would be the ones we are talking about. You know, if you fill out the free and reduced lunch form, you're qualifying under that, or the alternate income form. In math, it's our area that we continue to struggle, as does the whole state of California. In looking at these tests, we had some strength in 3rd and 4th grade. Again, our socioeconomically disadvantaged students grew by 7 percentage points. We did see a drop in our Black and African American students, which we are completely digging into and very concerned about. And so we'll jump into that. Go ahead to the next slide. So looking at our math results, because this is our big focus area, is that we can continue to see some consistency. This is, remember, comparing the previous year's 3rd graders to this last year's 3rd graders. So they're not the same kids. This is just looking at how did 3rd grade do. And so you see we're kind of up, down. You see the 5th grade went up. So those, so we're looking at there, like, what are the practices, what are the strategies that the school's using, the curriculum that would be benefiting the students there. If you go to the next one, this is where we get to look at same kids, or as much as you have same kids, kid or two changes here. So for example, the first column here, this is the class of 2027. So it's our current 9th graders. So you're seeing their 8th grade score, or percentage of meeting or exceeding standard, is 37% from 8th grade, and then from and then the gray one, the 41%, is their 7th grade. So you see there that we're about the same for a lot of these. Where you see it different is the class of 2030, and this is where the 2022 scores you're looking at, that was all of our STAR Impact students when they were in 5th grade. And then the red is looking at, now this is with that big influx of new 6th graders. So that's including PACT, Leading Edge, and PFAA. So that's our big influx year. And so that's why we see kind of a drop there. But we haven't had the overall state data out yet. And although I have been talking to my contacts all across Sacramento County, and while I don't have anything official yet, I'm going to have that. We're all getting together on September 29th and comparing our data. That we seem to be about where other schools are. They're all seeing the same kind of, very similar scores and little drops here and there. Go ahead to the next one. This is where we look at our subgroups, our groups that we are focusing on, and we're really trying to move the needle. And so you start here with the all Natomas Charter School. We held about steady from last year, 42%. You see our socioeconomically disadvantaged went up a little bit. Our EL went up just a little bit. You see our, the RFET is our reclassified students. So those are our students that were ELs and then are now reclassified. And this is something that you'll see consistently, is that once they get reclassified, they're bumping way up, right? So if you look at it from the gray EL to the red EL, we've taken out all the kids that were doing really well, right? And so we're still making progress with them. Inclusive Ed held about steady. This is the 12% drop. And I've been looking a lot into that. and really concerned with it. I'm looking at, because we also have 2 or more races and then our white there. And so I'm looking at how many kids are those, which are the kids that are impacted in that. And so part of what we've been looking at is a lot of our students were growing in the category of 2 or more races. That category has been growing over the years, and that reflects our community, right? We have a really diverse community with families with lots of different backgrounds. So I've been looking into, although I haven't gotten through all, 1,100 kids that we tested, but I've been looking into those, and it's seeming that we have about 25% of our 2 or more races includes families who are of the African American Black community. So I'm trying to pull those out and see, what are we doing to support them? And then I'm also looking at, do we have a crossover between our special education population with that? It's not a huge population crossover until you get to 7th, 8th, and 11th grade. But so I'm doing a lot of research. We'll have more on that there. But we are really concerned about that. In addition, we're looking at, as a part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion work this year, is really digging in with an outside facilitator to do some feedback groups. Where we're going to be talking to students, we're going to be talking to families, we're going to be talking to staff to really get their perspective on what's going on, right? Because we were a little excited last year, we had a little jump, right? And now a dip. So we really need to dig into what is going on. And so the staff are going to be looking at like those individual students and the data and really figuring out what's going on. Is it by, the class? Is it by the student group? What is the issue? So if anybody's watching YouTube out there, please be on the lookout. We're working with our facilitator meeting. I think it's later this week to come up with a plan, and then we're going to be putting together some listening groups and things. So we want people to join in so we can figure out how to work with this this concerning issue. Although we are not alone in this, this is something that is unfortunately, common in the Sacramento area and across California. It doesn't make it any better because these are our people, right? Our little people, and sometimes they're this tall, but they're our little people, right? And we want to make sure that we're getting them the most or the best that we can
The
get.
other piece, just to add what Laura's talking about, for all these subgroups too, today we started also looking at it by grade level and academy to see, are these patterns that, just take elementary, middle, and high school, is the pattern the same across? Take academy, is the pattern the same across? And what we're seeing, preliminarily, there's some big differences, so some academies are faring a little bit more strongly than other academies, and so we don't necessarily have a why for that. Similarly, elementary versus middle high school. And so that's when, as Laura was saying, the principals will be coming to the October meeting. And that's where we're going to do some deeper dives into, we are one K-12 school when we look at the data, so it's like looking at district data. But it's a little bit like you have one family, but you have 5 kids, and we know every child in our family has slightly different needs. And we're definitely seeing that in our data, where STAR has different needs than PAC does, which is different than Leading Edge and PFA and ECA. So that's why the principals will be, one, disaggregating their own data, but then also working with teachers and their community members on what are the programmatic changes or adjustments that we need to make.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you mentioned the shout out to the community, will this gathering be available via Zoom for input? I'm just thinking of.
We haven't planned that far yet.
Right,
We're meeting
right,
with the
right.
facilitator this week.
Yeah.
Ms. Larson and I are gonna meet with them and we're gonna come up with a plan. Generally, we'll have to come up with how we're going to do that. We would love to have people in the space because that makes it easier to really talk about how we're feeling and what we need and But that's the plan. We're gonna have multiple vehicles for gathering this information.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking with Zoom, I mean, even if parent, can access and at least listen to what the conversation is and maybe give input, as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll have multiple vehicles in play. Yeah, absolutely. All right, next one, please. Oh, question, sorry, Shante.
So I think you were saying that the community is relatively small.
Yes, it is, it's only 8.74% of all of NCS.
So have we kind of looked at each child to assess, if there is one student who maybe performed better on the test, why is that? Have they maybe taken advantage of some of our after school support, tutoring support, as opposed to maybe a child who didn't perform as well, has not yet taken advantage of those? That's one question. And then the other question is this result consistent with some of our other touch points on data? Because this is just one.
Just one, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Data point. Is this kind of disparity being reflected in some of our other testing data or data around like completing homework or classroom engagement? What are we finding there?
So that's what the teachers are about to start digging into, is really looking at all of those pieces. So we're just able to disaggregate all of this information last week. And so I spent my weekend looking at it, and then now they're gonna start looking at, is this, are we seeing this in grades? Are we seeing this in, all of these other areas? And so yes, they actually have like all these little pivot tables, and then they can click on it and see exactly who the kids are.
Okay.
And so I've been doing a lot of work on that, but the teachers are the ones who know the kids intimately and know, what are they taking advantage of, what are they not. And when we have our listening groups, we're going to be looking at all different aspects of our community, because you're right, if we have some, a group of students that's doing really well, okay, well, what's going on? What do we have, are their parents doing this? Are their teachers doing this? Are they a part of this, club that makes them feel really great? Like whatever that is, we're going to be looking at like what's working, and then how can we share that? And you bring up a really good point that we also, we have like math tutoring going on after school in the middle school. We've got, the mentors at Lincoln Webb helping out, their other students, because a lot of it comes down to like, do I feel safe? Do I belong? Do I have someone I can go to if I'm having, troubles or struggles with something? So yeah, we're going to be looking at all of those pieces.
And, kind of attitudes and around testing, it's like state testing.
Right.
Is not reflective of exactly what's happening with the child. So I just wanted to know, is this more of a one-off data thing, but everything else is kind of more in line with what we're seeing from some of these other subcategories?
Yeah. Well, and that's what we're going to be able to see with the academy data. So the principals in October will be able to speak to that. And they all just finished their iReady assessments, which is our local diagnostic. And so they'll be able to have those as comparison points as well. So I know their teachers have been working with that, and they're setting up groups for how they're going to like differentiate, this group of kids needs help with fractions, this group of kids needs help with decimals. So they're working on that right now. I know at Star Academy this last week, the teachers all set up their WIN groups. And so, who are they going to focus on for different areas? So we'll be able to take a look at all of that as well. So, yeah. I know, these kids, they're just gonna get so much love and attention, they're not gonna know what to do with it, right? Okay, next one, Zita. So moving on to language arts. So from what I can tell, we still remain a little bit higher in language arts than what we see in the local community. Definitely have, like 5th grade is just I don't know, fifth grade had some magic going on. And I love it, and we're gonna continue it. And so, and I know that, I was talking to Diana Wilson, the Star Academy principal today, and so she was saying, yeah, we're talking about what are they doing in their classes, and how do you do your, intervention, and how, so the teachers are having some really good conversations about strategies, and then having, going and observing each other to see how they're being really effective with their students. So, overall, kind of holding steady, a little bit higher in some areas. If you go to the next one, please. Here we look at those cohorts, and so you see growth in all of the areas except for that time where we change from one smaller group of students of about 100 students and we go up to 200, 250, and so we see that change. But even in that realm, we only dropped a little bit with that new influx of students that haven't been a part of Natomas Charter, and that's something that we have seen over time. And we've studied for many years, is that the longer we can have a kid consistently at Natomas Charter, we can move them up and build their skills. So that's, the best case scenario is if we can have a kid go all the way through, then we're pushing them as long as possible, right? All right, next one, please. Here we look at our groups. And so we see kind of similar, a little bit of drops here and there, but within a point or two. With the size of our school, a lot of times that is just one or two kids. When you're dealing with, some of these groups are 100 kids, that's one or two kids that have those changes. So next one, please. Okay, so really continuing the journey. Oh, I went ahead of myself there. Talking about my DPI. So we have, of course, our NTSS, which is a multi-tiered system of support. So the teachers are getting together on a regular basis with the administrators, looking at all aspects of the child. Who do we have a concern about? This kid might be struggling social emotionally. So we're going to look and make sure it's not impacting other things. This kid might be having some behavior issues. I know I was working with the little sweetie pie at Star last week, who was just having so many problems, right? And there's just some stuff, some turmoil going on in that little body, and having to do some stuff going on at home, but we were supporting her so that she could still do her academics, And so you're looking at all those aspects and how can we support the kid and talk to the parents and everything. Focus on math, of course, we have our TOSA, our math coach still, Courtney Selby, who is a rock star and was doing so many amazing statistical analyses that, were way beyond me today. She was amazing. And so she's helping with implementing our curriculum. We've got all of our students on a very specific math curriculum, and she's been working with training the staff and getting them support. In addition, we are working on having co-teaching in the math classes. So that means that there's two teachers in the classroom. Sometimes it is the special education teacher in with a math teacher. Sometimes it's two math teachers so that they can really work with and differentiate and support the students. We did a pilot in one middle school class last year in PFA, and it was really successful, and the kids were showing tons of growth. So we've expanded that this year. So that will be.
So Laura, is the goal to have every math class have two folks?
That's what we're trying. Right now at PFAA, we have there's at least two sections of every math level that have two teachers in it. So we hired an additional math teacher, and then we're pushing in our education specialists in there. And so what we've done is we've looked at grouping the students that have the highest need, and then they have the double teachers so that they can work. And it's really quite neat. Like some of them, like they are just like team, going together, tackling things, planning together, assessing together, discussing the students together. It's fabulous.
And realize after special education, math is our most difficult to fill position.
Yes.
So along with Courtney's role with doing curriculum implementation, she's doing job embedded professional development with the math teachers, and actually at the moment writing all the curriculum for the ECA math teacher, because that is a position that's still unfilled. And this is something I know I've already said this to the board, but I'm gonna say it again so that the community can hear as well, anyone watching from home. There are no people currently in a teaching credential program in the Sacramento region working on their math credential for next year. Not a single person.
Wow.
Because we've called every single credentialing agency trying to take someone who's just starting a credential program and turn them into an intern and, you know, come join our school. So like, we desperately in our community need math teachers and need people that, you know, are interested in becoming math teachers, even if that might mean, you know, they need help getting their bachelor's degree and then getting their teaching credential. Shoot, I was even like, maybe I need to get my math credential. Because we need math teachers.
We're in a state of crisis
Yep.
with the math in
Yep.
particular. I was reading an article that colleges and universities were saying the students are showing up in their first year of college not prepared for the college level courses, and this was something that's relatively a newer phenomenon.
Yeah, and just not having people in the credential programs. I mean, we have reached out to credential programs, colleges, we're looking at contracting services. We are doing all the state residency programs, intern programs, you know, working with, we've called everybody. We're at the point now where we're reaching out to
The Philippines.
the Philippines.
The Philippines actually there's companies that basically work to recruit teachers who are currently teaching in the Philippines to come to the United States, and they provide them visas, work visas to come. So we're looking at that. I mean, we're looking at literally every single way that we could have a math teacher. But, you know, going back to what you're saying, it makes total sense, because if you think about math progression and how math is learned, out of all the subjects that was probably most disrupted during the pandemic, it was math instruction. And it's like, there are just not enough human resources to help us get kids up to speed. We're fortunate that this year that in PFA's case, we overstaffed by one math teacher very intentionally so that we could have more math intervention being taught. And so we have an individual teaching math intervention classes, which is something that we actually have never had before, just because we've struggled to find enough people to do the math intervention work. So Courtney Selby is like golden, because she's helping all of these individuals, many of whom are actually relatively new in their career as math teachers, get stronger as math teachers. Plus, you know, in the case of ECA, helping fill in the vacancy that we have right now. So, math teachers, math.
Discussion at all about utilizing the students that we have at PFA that are into math to help tutor younger students and pay them, like we did with the office, thinking of when you.
So we are setting up tutoring. The National Honor Society does peer tutoring. And so they're doing their applications right now, and then they'll be setting up their tutoring sessions. They run that through the Knights Landing in the after school time period. So definitely, yeah, we're looking to get that moving as well. We're trying to go at it from every angle. How can we get more math, more STEM, and you know, the Courtney Selby has really worked with the high school math, or high school and middle school math teachers to develop a community where they're tight now. They're like moving and grooving together. They're communicating. They're a team, and they're all on board. So I definitely am very appreciative of the dedication. Yeah.
Now, is this approach also going to be something that Leading Edge will be taken on as well?
Yes, and Leading Edge is, because they are smaller, they have their paraprofessionals pushing into their classes as well as the ed specialist. So yeah, definitely. I don't know if they'll get a whole new, whole additional teacher, but just because of the number of sections. But yeah, this is something that we're trying out and trying to support. And I know that Courtney Selby goes into those classes a lot as well. And so she's in there as an extra person. And so they schedule her out different days of the week to go in and be that second person. So yeah, and she spends a lot of time with Leading Edge for sure. So, yeah.
Okay, so yes, our focus on math, right? It's number 2, strategic goal. We're putting the money in, we're putting the time in. And then I a little bit on our focus on diversity and inclusion and equity, having that feedback. We are going to continue to focus on the subgroup disparities that we see with our emergent bilinguals, with our TOSA, Alyssa Ortiz-Khan, with classes, new designated curriculum. I got to sub today. It was so exciting. Alyssa had to go to a event at the county office for emergent bilingual teachers, and I got to sub. It was so, oh my gosh, it was so much fun. Those kids are great. They're down to learn. They're like, let's just break this stuff down and figure it out. So in our inclusive ed or special education, we are working on staffing and curriculum and really building those programs. We're lucky to have Amy Kaler as our director for that program. So we're making some good strides and dedicating some time. And then extended day for the ELOP program is having those resources and those opportunities, like we were talking about the tutoring through both SCAPE and Knights Landing is happening. Okay, next one. Digital score reports. All right, so all families should have gotten an email if their student took a state test last year that allows them to go into PowerSchool and see their state tests scores, their student score report. If families say, oh, I can't figure this system out, I need help, I just want a paper version, we will send it out to them. They just have to let us know. I will put a little asterisk that there was an issue with the addresses on the score reports because they're printed by the state. And so I don't know what happened, but they put kind of, I don't know, wacky addresses. Never fear. We send it out through PowerSchool. If you ask for one to be mailed home to you, we don't look at what's on there. We look at what, even if it had been correct, right? We always look at what is our most current address because families will move, since last spring to now. And so we always go to our student information system and mail it out. So nobody got your score report. Just be certain. But I love that we have so many families that look at them and are calling us and being like, did you know? Right? I even had some students that has reported it to me, which is really sweet. So yay, our families really care. All right, next one, please. Let's see, I think I've talked about all of these. Go ahead to the next one. So in October, as I said, we'll have the principals here with me. We'll be looking at Academy specific data. They'll be looking at their iReady scores. Hopefully we will have the public release. Everybody keep your fingers crossed of the data so that we can have the official numbers and not just my Excel prowess.
I hope everyone
right?
is as excited about the public
right?
release.
Oh my gosh, I know. I should make a paper chain, right? And count down the days. But we, knowing that we are really focused on having a data-informed instructional response, all of our staff are doing what's called a PDSA cycle, which is a plan, do, study, act. And so this is a cycle where they look at data, they make a goal, they do some changes, some interventions, and then they study, did it work, did it not? And so they're all doing that, looking at data this year. So we're really trying to be very intentional in what we're doing, and then setting up our intervention and support plans. So I think that's it. Any additional questions? I know we've had questions along the way, and I know I always get to share with you guys the really exciting stuff and sometimes not so happy.
Thank you.
Questions? Okay, to be continued in October.
Thank you.
Dr. Wood.
Executive Director comments. So as we close out tonight, first I just want to say thank you all for staying so late and community member for joining us as well. We appreciate having you here. As we close out tonight, I did want to note, today's the 22nd anniversary of September 11th attacks. It's definitely something, we talked about with students in different age appropriate ways today. And one thing that I know Dr. Locktusher with Leading Edge Kids is it's, as we reflect on what happened on 9/11 and, celebrate the lives of the people that we lost, that it's also an important time to also remember, it's the importance of coming together as a community, right? Of coming together, showing compassion for each other, really striving for a better future, and that, through the unity of working together, we can overcome some really significant challenges. Kind of interesting side note, it's also the 22nd anniversary of my first day ever in the classroom by myself. My first day in the classroom, what a way to start your career, right? At Johansson High School in Modesto, I was substitute teaching for social studies. So anyways, just kind of want to recognize that. Between now and the next time we come together, we actually have quite a bit going on. So, we do, as you heard from the students, we have our Matthew Shepard Foundation event coming up on the 22nd. So Dennis and Judy Shepard will be working with our students right after school and then working with the community in the evening. We also do have a election going on in November if you live in a certain part of the school district. And so our students are hosting a candidate forum on September 26th, which is a really great opportunity to come here from the 6 individuals who are running. We do have fall break, October 9th through the 13th, but because we can never just go on a fall break and relax. We do have a couple of field trips going on. One Voice Yellowstone is occurring. We also have a group of students going up to Oregon for the Shakespeare Festival, which is really exciting because they actually haven't gone since before COVID. So this is the first post-COVID trip. The next board meeting is on the 22nd. It is Ashante's last official board meeting, although she did inform us tonight that she will not be able to join us at that meeting. So we will be celebrating Ashante at the November meeting.
Oh, wait, what's the October?
It's 22nd.
22nd?
Yeah, because of fall break, we had to move it.
Oh, I'll be here.
Oh,
yes! I was still on our second Monday.
Oh, no, it's because of fall break, it was all messed up this time, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was hoping if we just skipped it, you would have to keep coming. Laura?
Dr. Good, one more event,
Yeah,
math night.
oh, yeah.
Okay, and Leading Edge families, tomorrow night.
Math night's tomorrow night.
Be here, you get to see how the curriculum works, see what CPM is like. It's gonna be awesome, parents doing math together, connecting, loving it. Come on down.
Maybe we can recruit some math teachers there.
Right?
Don't stay too long at math night, you might be going math teacher before you go home. All right, so with that, thank you guys all for a lovely meeting.
Thank you. Board Director comments?
I've got a couple.
Okay. One is, I thought the back to school night here at PFA was fantastic. So many parents were here. We had to park way down the street and walk over. And the second part that I like, well, besides meeting the teachers and getting the real scoop on what the real projects are, and what it's all about, which was very helpful, having a teenager. But also Mr. Love sharing the financial aspect of absenteeism. And I thought that was very good. And of course, the parents that I know that are kind of lackadaisical in that were there to hear it. But they were absent. But I
Maria
thought-
sending them emails.
Yeah. No, I invited them, but anyway, that was so concrete and so helpful. So that was my comment about back to school. The second comment I wanted to make was the training for the Brown Act that those of us participated online. I found to be very useful and helpful in the handouts, and I just have a better sense of how it works and why we're expected to do certain things and why we can't do certain things. So, yeah.
So now you understand why I come knocking at the door at closed session to.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that was good. Thank you for offering that to us.
Our pleasure.
Appreciate that.
It definitely was beneficial because I understood it, but now I understand it even more and the nuances around it. So it definitely was beneficial.
And we know how fucked up we are.
All right.
All right, future board agenda items. Going once, going twice.
Don't worry, I'll find things to put on the.
Form 700.
Oh, Shante, we gotta do 700 form.
Before I go?
Yeah.
Oh, there's an exit.
Area grievances. All right, I will adjourn us at, is that say 9:03?
Yeah.